Since we first started keeping track after the 1950s, obesity in America has more than tripled. We went from 13% of adults to over 40% in a single lifetime, and it is not because of our genetics changing. DNA can't move that fast, especially in 60 years. And it wasn't discipline either. Your grandma didn't have more willpower than you. She ate butter and bacon and drank whole milk and had dessert. My grandma's dessert was the best. Yet she stayed the same size her entire adult life. Both of my grandmas did, without a diet, without a gym, and without counting a single calorie. So in this video, I'm going to show you the 6 reasons everyone stayed skinny in the 50s, ranking them from smallest impact to biggest, why each one worked, and then how to bring them back into your lifestyle starting today. And when we hit number 1, you're going to see exactly why the diets that you've tried never stood a chance. Let's start with reason number 6. I want to show you how your grandmother burned more calories before lunch than most people burn in a full gym workout without ever once calling it exercise. Picture a Tuesday morning in 1955. The laundry doesn't wash itself because fewer than half of American homes had an automatic washing machine. Only about 1 in 5 had a dryer. So washing clothes meant scrubbing them, wringing them, and then doing actually what I did growing up as a kid. Hundreds of loads of hauling a wet basket outside, hanging every piece of clothing on a clothesline, allowing the sun to dry it, and then getting it all back in before it rained. The dishes got washed by hand. This is how I grew up, not even in the 50s. Every single meal washed by hands. The floors got swept and scrubbed on hands and knees, and most families had one car, which the husband usually drove to work or worked on farm. So the errands and market trips, those happened on foot if you lived in a town. Groceries got carried home by hand. No one called that a workout, but your body was treating it like one. Scientists have a name for all the calories that you burn outside of normal exercise. It is called NEAT. It's an acronym that stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That is a fancy way of saying every step, every chore, every minute spent standing instead of sitting. A researcher at the Mayo Clinic discovered something incredible about this concept. Between 2 people of the same size, NEAT can differ by as much as 2,000 calories a day, simply because of how much more they move during the day. That's more than most people burn in an entire workout several times over. And in the 1950s, I definitely know this for my grandmas and my grandpas. Everyday chores kept your NEAT sky high. Scrubbing a floor burns 300 calories an hour. Walking home carrying bags of groceries burns 400 an hour. I'm not even getting into farm work. So run through a normal day in 1955, the laundry, the floors, the dishes, the walking, 3 meals cooked, standing at the stove, for example. You burn several hundred extra calories before dinner without 1 intentional minute of exercise. The men had it built in too, because far more jobs back then meant standing, lifting, moving for 8 hours instead of sitting at a desk. Then the washing machines, the dryers, the second cars, the riding lawnmowers, all of that showed up. And all of that daily movement disappeared. So the way to get that movement back is to make a few things in your day less convenient on purpose. Park at the other end of the lot. Use a push mower for the front yard. Wash the pots and pans by hand after dinner. Stand up while you fold laundry. Take your phone calls walking around the house or outside like I do. Sweep the kitchen every night instead of waiting until it needs to be done. Each one sounds small, but that's exactly what makes them work. They're too small to skip, and they keep you moving all day long the way daily life used to be. Do that, and you've taken back the first thing the modern world removed from your day. Now remember, out of the 6 lessons in this countdown, this one had the smallest impact, but you can burn a lot of extra energy just by moving more in your day. There are 5 more to go, and each one bigger than the last, including what happened to the size of everything that you eat, the biggest lie ever told about your kitchen, and the #1 factor so sneaky that the food industry built an entire multi-billion-dollar business on top of it. That one alone explains more about the last 60 years than everything else on this list combined. The next reason snuck into American life through the refrigerator, and it added an entire meal to your day without you ever sitting down to eat it. Back in the 1950s, the drink options were short. Water from the tap, coffee, black, maybe with a splash of cream, milk with dinner, that's what I grew up on, iced tea in the summer. Soda existed, but it came in one size, a little 6.5-ounce glass bottle, about the size of a juice glass. And it was a treat for like a party or a pizza night, not something that's just consistently sitting in the fridge by the case. Now count up what the average person drinks today. A large flavored coffee on the way to work, that can run 400 calories or more once the syrup and the whipped cream goes in. Some juice, like orange juice or apple juice for breakfast, a soda or a sweet tea with lunch, maybe a glass of wine or a beer with dinner. Add it up and you've been swallowing an entire extra meal every single day. Now, here's the part that makes this so sneaky. Researchers ran a study where they gave people the same number of extra calories every single day, but one group ate them as jelly beans, and the other group drank them as soda. The jelly bean group didn't gain a pound. Their bodies noticed the extra calories that were coming in and then automatically ate less at their meals to make up for it. But the soda group gained weight because their bodies never noticed the calories at all. They ate their normal meals on top of everything that they drank, and it just piled on. Now, that is not a free pass to eat jelly beans. It is meaning that liquid doesn't really get counted by your body in the overall intake of food, and it can really add up fast. And to make matters worse, drinks themselves kept getting bigger. That little 6.5-ounce from the 1950s became a 12-ounce can in the 60s, and then a 20-ounce plastic bottle in the 90s. That's what I grew up on. And then today, a large soda at a drive-thru can be 30 ounces, more than 4 times the size of the original. Coffee went through the same thing, turning from a 0-calorie drink, black, into a milkshake with a coffee flavor. So this one's simple to fix. Make water your default all day long. If you drink coffee, take it black or with a splash of cream. And if it needs a syrup pump and whipped cream, that's a dessert. So treat it like that. Be careful with juices and smoothies as well. They're marketed as health food, but most of them are concentrated sugar with the fiber stripped out of it. So your body handles them just like it handles soda. If you want a soda now and then, do it the way they did in the 50s. A small glass, on a special occasion, not a daily habit. And try to reach for one that's maybe not loaded with high fructose corn syrup. Let's go stevia based or some other natural sweetener. And that leads us to the fourth habit that most of you were taught as kids, ones that used to keep people thin and now does the exact opposite. If you grew up being told to clean your plate like I did, you are not alone. There was an actual clean plate club in American elementary schools where kids pledged to not leave a scrap of food behind. It started as a wartime campaign to stop food waste. President Truman brought it back after World War II, and an entire generation had it drilled in at the dinner table. You finish what's in front of you. And back then, that habit was completely harmless because in the 1950s, a plate was a very different thing than it is today. A standard dinner plate back then measured about 9 inches across. Today's are closer to 12. Sounds like a small difference, but plates grow by area, not by inches, and going from 9 to 12 nearly doubles the surface area that your food sits on. And if you still got your mother's china in a cabinet somewhere, go pull out one of her dinner plates and set it next to the ones that you now use today. Hers is going to look like a salad plate. Now, this is important because your brain doesn't measure food in calories, it measures it with your eyes. A full plate becoming an empty plate is what registers as I'm done eating. Researchers show that when people serve themselves on bigger dishes, they dish out and eat roughly 40% more without noticing any difference and without feeling any fuller afterward. So the clean your plate habit never went away. The plate underneath it just kept growing. And it wasn't just the plates. When the first McDonald's menu launched in 1955, a hamburger weighed under 4 ounces. The fries came in one size, about 2.4 ounces. And the soda was 7 ounces, period. No large upgrades and definitely no super sizing. And no one walked away hungry. That was considered a complete meal. Today, The fries that you call a small are bigger than the entire original serving. A large drink can run 30 ounces, like we mentioned, and plenty of burgers on the menu weigh more than double the original. Decade after decade, portions grew a little at a time, and what we think of as a normal amount of food grew right along with them. Now, there's one thing people always bring up about the 50s, so let's deal with it head on: the smoking. It's true, about 1 in 4 American women smoked back then, and nicotine is something that curbs appetite. But researchers have actually measured how much of America's weight gain can be traced back to people quitting cigarettes. And at most, it explains about 1/5 of the rise. That means if nobody in America had ever quit smoking, we'd still be living through most of this epidemic. So the cigarettes don't come close to explaining why the generation stayed lean. The 9-inch plate was doing far more of the work at every single meal without anyone even thinking about it. And that's actually great news, because out of everything in this countdown, this is one of the easiest ones to fix. You can do it tonight. Eat your dinner off the salad plate, the 9 or 10-inch plate. You've probably already got some in your cabinet. Fill it up the same way you always do and eat until it's clean. You'll be eating a lot less food, but it won't feel that way because your brain is looking at a full plate that ends up empty. And that's all it needs to feel like you've had a complete meal. And there are a couple easy upgrades that make this work even better. First, serve the food straight from the stove instead of putting it in serving dishes on the table. When getting seconds means getting up, people naturally eat less. Second, use a smaller serving spoon. A smaller scoop means smaller portions end up in front of you without you ever thinking about it. And when you eat out, remember that restaurant portions have grown even more than home portions over the same amount of time. So box up half of your meal before you take the first bite. That's the hack. Not after you're already stuffed. Your grandmother never portion controlled a single meal in her life. Her dishes did it for her. Starting tonight, yours can do the same thing. The next reason is where the story gets ugly. Because the way that generations ate didn't just fade on its own, it got taken away from you. In the 1950s, there was a can sitting next to the stove in just about every American kitchen. Inside it was bacon grease, saved from that breakfast, ready to cook for dinner that night. Butter went on everything. Milk came whole. Cream came with coffee. Lard made the pie crust. And breakfast was just a couple of eggs cooked in that butter with a side of bacon. A breakfast that held people all the way until lunch without a single snack in between. That's a list of almost everything you've spent the last 40 years being told to avoid. And yet the generation eating all of it stayed lean and never seemed to battle the constant hunger that so many people deal with today. So how did that entire way of eating disappear from American kitchens in a single generation? Well, it started with one researcher. In the late 1950s, a man named Ansel Keys became famous for the idea that saturated fat caused heart disease. Famous enough to make the cover of Time magazine. His research had real problems, and scientists still argue about it to this day. But the bigger story is what everyone else did with it. In 1977, the government released official dietary goals telling Americans to cut fat. And by 1980, it was formal federal policy. The food industry saw the opportunity of a century because when you pull the fat out of food, it tastes like cardboard. So they replaced it mostly with sugar and refined starch. The low-fat cookies, fat-free yogurt, the heart-healthy cereal. Fat came out, sugar went in, and it all got marketed as the responsible choice. It got so absurd that starting in 1995, the American Heart Association was putting its heart-healthy checkmark on sugary kid cereals, including marshmallow cereals, which is just sky high in sugar content, because their program only checked for fat and for cholesterol. Sugar wasn't even on the list. Meanwhile, the butter in your kitchen got replaced with industrial seed oils. Over the last century, American soybean consumption just alone increased more than 1,000-fold. Researchers called it one of the single biggest changes to the American food supply ever recorded. And that swap is exactly why you're hungrier than your grandmother ever was. Protein and fat trigger the hormones that tell your brain that you're full. The same hormones weight loss drugs like Ozempic are chasing today, and they keep you satisfied for hours. Sugar and refined starches barely touch those hormones. Instead, they spike your blood sugar, crash it, and leave you craving the next quick fix hit a couple hours later. In fact, people People who started the day with a high sugar breakfast ate 53% more at their next meal. So when America made that trade, we became a country that's hungry all day long. And the people this hit the hardest were the ones trying the hardest, the ones who read the labels, followed the guidelines, did everything by the book, but the book was wrong. And so this fix might be the most enjoyable one in the whole video. Bring the real fat back. Cook your eggs in butter. Use ghee for high heat and fry in bacon grease or tallow, the way that every American kitchen used to do it. Buy whole milk, full fat yogurt, and real cheese. And when a label says low fat, flip it over and read the sugar line because you know what that probably means. Most important of all, build your breakfast around protein and fat instead of a cereal or a muffin. That one change alone puts the fullness hormones back to work for you the same way that they worked for your grandmother. Reason number 2. Now, this next one sounds like a joke when you first hear it. A country's Supreme Court had to rule on whether a famous sandwich chain's bread legally counts as bread. That really happened in Ireland in 2020. Their law says bread only counts as a staple food if the sugar stays under 2% of the flour's weight. The sandwich bread in question came in at about 10%, 5 times over the line. So the court ruled it couldn't legally be called bread. By the letter of the law, it was closer to cake. And that's not a strange story about one restaurant. That's what's happening to nearly everything in the American grocery store after the 1950s. Back then, bread had 4 or 5 ingredients, and it went stale in a couple of days because nothing artificial was keeping it quote unquote fresh. Vegetables came with dirt still on them. Chicken came with bones, and dinner was made by a person in a kitchen with real ingredients. Even the store itself was small. Until the 1970s, an average grocery store carried about 3,000 products. Today, it's 30 to 40,000. And that explosion wasn't more vegetables. It was aisle after aisle of new packaged, flavored, engineered products. Today, right around half of the calories average American adults eat come from ultra-processed food, a category that barely existed in the 1950s. And I mean engineered, literally. Food companies have a term, the bliss point, for the exact combination of sugar, salt, and fat that keeps you eating past full. And they employ scientists to find it product by product so that you consume more of it. Nobody's grandmother was formulating her pot roast that way. But then in 1970, something entered the food supply that supercharged all of it. High fructose corn syrup. And that was a real problem for fat loss because of how your body handles fructose. Regular sugar gets used all over your body, but fructose gets processed almost entirely by your liver. And when that much of it comes flooding in day by day, your liver converts the entire extra straight into fat. And then on top of that, fructose doesn't trigger your fullness hormones the way that real food does. So you can take in hundreds of calories of it and stay just as hungry as you were before. It didn't exist in a single 1950s pantry, but it was dirt cheap compared to sugar, so it quickly spread everywhere. And in 1970, it was less than 0.5% of the sweeteners that Americans ate, but by 2000, it was 42%. And cheap sweetness also changed how food got made, because now companies could pour sugar into foods nobody thinks of as sweet. Bread, pasta sauce, crackers, salad dressing, yogurt. That means you can eat all day without touching a dessert and still keep your blood sugar spiking meal after meal like you ate dessert. And that's how that sandwich bread ended up at 10% sugar. So how do you shop like it's 1955 in a store that's built to stop you? By spending your money around the outside walls, stay to the outer layer of the store. Produce, meat, eggs, dairy, because that's where the actual food still lives. And before you put something in your cart, flip the package over and read the ingredient list, because it's where you'll find the truth. If a product lists 20 or 30 ingredients that you couldn't buy individually, that's not a recipe anymore, that's a formula. Now I know you might be thinking, there are thousands of ingredients out there and no one can memorize what they all mean, but that's exactly why I built my app. I went through 11,000 food ingredients, figured out which ones work against your body and which ones support fat loss, and I built all of them into one simple free app. So the next time you're at the store, pick up a product and use it. You can scan a barcode, but not all foods are in a barcode database. You can actually take a picture of the ingredients themselves. It'll show you right away whether that food supports your goals or works against them. I will put a link for that app in the description of how you can download it and then use it on your next grocery store run and then let it do the thinking for you. And now, the number one reason everyone stayed skinny in the 1950s and why every diet you've ever tried never stood a chance. It starts with a phrase that you've probably heard 1,000 times growing up. Don't eat that, you'll spoil your dinner. Your mother said it. Her mother said it, because in 1955, the kitchen ran on schedule. 3 meals a day at the same times every day, and in between, the kitchen was closed. If you got hungry at 3 in the afternoon, the answer was simple. Dinner's at 6. And without anyone realizing it, that habit was protecting the most powerful fat-burning switch in your body. Every time you eat something, your insulin rises and your body goes into storage mode for fat. It can only switch over and start burning your stored fat once insulin falls back down. And that takes a real gap with no food at all. Give your body that gap, and fat burning climbs by as much as 50% above normal. So 3 meals without anything in between was flipping that switch 3 times a day automatically for an entire country. But today, the average American eats 5.7 times a day. And when researchers counted every snack and calorie containing drink, the average gap between eating was just 3 hours. Between actual meals, the natural gap was over 5.5 back in the 50s. So snacking alone is cutting your fat burning window nearly in half. Now, some of you are thinking, but I snack on healthy things. Well, researchers compared a candy bar to a healthy protein bar, and the protein bar spiked insulin just as much. So to your fat burning switch, the interruption is identical, no matter what the wrapper says. And that's exactly why your diets never stood a chance. Thinking about the advice you were given for decades: eat 6 small meals a day, keep your metabolism fed, never let yourself go too hungry. That advice had you eating more often, not less often. So insulin never fell. Your body stayed in storage mode all day, no matter how clean the food got. That's why the weight wouldn't move, and it had nothing to do with your willpower. So the fix is one that your mother already knew. 3 meals a day at consistent times. 4 to 5 hours apart, nothing in between except water or black coffee or tea, and after dinner, the kitchen closes until breakfast. When hunger shows up between meals, drink a glass of water, give it 15 minutes, because early hunger is usually just thirst, or it's just habit. And when real hunger arrives, that feeling is the switch flipping. Your body finally pulling from stored fat, the exact thing you've been trying to make happen for years. The first week is the hardest, but keep protein and fat in every meal, and within a week or two, you'll barely notice the gaps. Now, everything in this video came from a world that doesn't exist anymore. So the real question is how you fit all of it into the world you actually live in with a modern schedule, a modern grocery store, and a modern kitchen. That's exactly what I put together in my other video. It's the complete daily routine that I would follow to lose weight as fast as possible from the moment that you wake up to the moment that your head hits the pillow. It takes the same principles that kept that whole generation lean, and then it turns them into an exact modern schedule. What to do in your first hour of awakening, the time that makes each habit work, and the mistakes that flip your body back into fat storage mode without you realizing it. So if you want to see what the perfect day for fat loss looks like today, this is it. I'll include a link to that video here. Click to watch it next, and I'll see you there.